Welcome to episode 7 of A Pint of Scotch, where the whiskey is aged, the beer is fresh, and the ideas are cutting edge. In each episode, three spirit aficionados, who also happen to be industry leaders, share their thoughts, ideas, and sometimes fuel induced rants on leadership, empathy, people, technology, and culture. I'm Gautam Papa. I'm a modernization expert and have over 20 years of experience driving enterprise transformations through cloud native apps, data engineering, DevOps, and AI. I help enterprises achieve their business outcomes, fostering environments where empathy and technology coexist harmoniously. I'll be this episode's moderator, and I'm joined today by two of my very close friends and industry leaders, Brian Ross and JD Perry. Welcome again, guys. So,
JT
JD,
Perry, 20 years of experience in technology leadership and transformation as well. Brian, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Brian Ross. I'm just as old as everybody else and been doing this IT lark for a while. My specialty is in platform engineering and I operate as a field CTO. So helping customers like Gotham get value from technology by looking at those important things called humans.
Awesome. So today we are exploring one of the more pressing issues in artificial intelligence, which is AI privacy and policy. As it continues to revolutionize industries, its rapid adoption brings a slew of challenges, particularly in privacy and policy implementation. So I figured that today we could explore those intricacies, the complexities of developing those robust AI policies, the critical importance of addressing these issues head on. As we all know, there is not a second that goes by where we do not talk about AI anymore today. This rapid rise of AI has been nothing short of meteoric. According to a recent Gartner report, global AI adoption has grown by 270% in the last 4 years, with over 57% of organizations that report implementing AI in some way, shape, or form. And the way I see it, this rapid ascent has quickly moved AI through the hype cycle from the initial excitement, where AI was seen as a panacea for all business problems, to a more cautious approach, where many question its real world applications and its return on investment, especially with generative AI. And we've seen this with many technologies in the recent years, right? With shorter cycles happening over the recent years. On the other hand, McKinsey conducted a study which revealed that while 63% of the executives expect AI to drive significant value, less than 20% of those companies have truly integrated AI at scale to achieve some kind of meaningful outcome. And the truth, as always, it lies somewhere in between these two extremes. I believe AI holds immense potential, but its deployment must be managed responsibly with a keen eye on privacy and robust policy frameworks. So let me start with you, JT. Given the rapid adoption of AI and the critical importance of consumer trust, what are the biggest challenges enterprises face in implementing effective AI privacy measures? And how can they overcome these challenges?
My gut reaction to that is one of education, right? Both how does an organization educate their customers, ensuring transparency, right? I think we've all been a part of the organization. I think I've even been guilty of it in the past of, hey, I'm just going to go quick. They don't need to know right now if this feature is going to be awesome for them. But that burns you on the back end, right? If something goes wrong, and look, in this age of quickly evolving technologies and solutions and services and all that, something's going to go wrong, right? So let's lean into the fact that something's going to go wrong, but make sure your customers know what you're doing with AI, what you're doing with their data, responding to any feedback around that from that perspective, and also what's your commitment if something goes wrong, right? I think trying to be in front of that. It could be a little Pollyannish. I know I can hear lawyers behind me and in my head going, "Oh no, we can't make promises," right? But I think trying to be responsible from a legal risk perspective, but incredibly transparent with the customers will go a long way. The other side of that education is educating your staff, right? Educating the teams, especially those that don't live and breathe technology every day, right? Chat GPT is wonderful. I use it. I use it in limited areas as part of my job and things like that. But how are you going to make sure they understand what's inappropriate and trust them to make the right decision, right? We talk a lot here about how you trust your people and invest your people, right? You hired them. You're responsible for them, right? Right. They're good people. But how do you trust them to make the right decisions? And then we're going to get to, you shouldn't upload Sally's medical history into ChatGPT to write the letter. Like, don't do that. I will have to hold you accountable. I will have to fire you for that. And then in the most highly regulated world, I think we do have to look at almost data loss protection kind of styles, right? There are cases where you need to block some of those, right? That there are people who, if all they do is deal with, taking my healthcare regulated background, medical information and all that, you probably need to block it from their laptop just from a restriction. But again, make sure that's balanced with trust and empowerment of your people too, right? Right, not just big brothers. Brian, what are your thoughts?
So I say it's a complicated space, right? I think first and foremost, for all the companies I've spoken about AI, there is a real fear about being left behind. Because I think if we put the hype of AI to one side and about what it can and can't do, even I can't argue that AI can do some tremendous things, both in terms of productivity, enabling products, enabling people. Like, it's a pretty phenomenal technology. And I think there's still distance left in finding out what else we can do with it. The problem really, as JD's highlighted, is about trust. And I think that centers around data. There's two sides for me. Number one is trust is really difficult to establish in AI just now, because I can't make it through a week without reading about another AI company that has been very naughty in how they've acquired training data. And this gold rush behind training data is the big problem. Unfortunately, it's driving that trust down into the toilet for everybody, because no one can be sure that what they type into a ChatGPT prompt today is not going to end up in someone else's results tomorrow. And that's one of the big things I'm hearing with customers too. The second connected to that is around, from a legal standpoint, intellectual property. So we now have an industry forming around prompt engineering, and there's some ideas around there. Well, if I type something into your chat system, is that input mine or yours now? Or likewise, if we generate an outcome from that chat, then who does that belong to? Is that mine? Is it yours because you're hosting the service? Is it the vendor that's hosting your AI model behind the scenes? Or is it belonging to the training data? Or does it belong to the people that actually own the training data? Not the ones, the ones that have been stolen from, effectively, if you follow the media. So from there, we then end up with some companies looking at how they go about investing, because they cannot be left behind. We need to do something there. So do we host something? We use a cloud service, we use SaaS, that way we get really quick quick return. Or do we think about hosting our own models in our own data centers? Takes a bit longer, much more pricing, really big CPUs, etc. So what does the ROI look like? So the big thing I think for businesses just now is all this risk worth it? And if it is, where do we put our money? Like, how do we make this safe for people? And I think that's the big thing. And the question is really valid. I don't think anyone's got a great answer yet on how do we guarantee that AI is going to be safe, not just today, but tomorrow and the day after that.
No, I love those points that both of you are bringing. And I also agree that the FOMO effect, or the fear of missing out, is real. Almost every company is stumbling over itself, cutting corners, and trying to just aggressively move forward because they're so afraid that their competitors are probably going to have an edge. But I really do believe that we all are in the same playing field at this point, except maybe a few really big ones that have immense amount of money and deep pockets that can invest in their own private infrastructure and in compute and in all the CPU and the memory and the GPUs to build their own models on-prem. But other than that, most of the other companies, especially SMBs, I really wish they would slow down and take a step back and think it through, because as you mentioned, JT, and you also mentioned, Ryan, trust is really important. Like, what is the point of rushing through head on and being on a collision course, being crash test dummies when you are losing the trust of your customers? So to that regard, a study by the World Economic Forum, this comes to mind. It noted the AI policy development is one of the most complex areas enterprises grapple with. Often it requires cross-functional collaboration between IT, legal, compliance, and business units. And we all know how wonderful that goes, especially with any organization that has tried to go and modernize itself over the last 10 years. It can be pretty challenging. But despite this complexity, it was found that organizations with comprehensive AI policies are at least 2.5 times more likely to achieve their business goals and mitigate risks, according to associated with this AI deployment. So, Brian, let me start with you because, as we all know, GitLab has been extremely transparent about its approach here, and kudos to them. I really appreciate all the things that they're doing. So, considering all these inherent complexities, what are some best practices for developing comprehensive AI policies that ensure compliance, protect privacy, and drive business value? And while you're answering this, could you also share some examples from your experience where effective AI policy development have led to these tangible business outcomes, please?
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, I should say not a sales pitch for GitLab in any way. Disclosure, I do work for GitLab, but I think it's relevant here because GitLab is one of the few companies that is transparent by nature. And long before I joined GitLab, I was using large swathes of their handbook in my own management teams. And that ethos of transparency has continued, and it's a massive part of how we integrate AI, not into how the company works, but also into our product as well in the form of GitLab Duo. So all of this is open source, so you can go and have a look at it online. It's in the GitLab Transparency Center. But that's our first thing. We've been open and public about how we go about adopting AI. So first and foremost, we have some ethics and some principles that steer how we implement AI. We want to avoid some of the traps that we haven't even spoken about yet. Things like if we have a model, it's based on some training data. How do we know where the training data came from or what's in it? So in terms of unfair bias, whether that's diversity, inclusion, belonging, we need to make sure that the training data we're using is a good representation of the people that are going to be using the system. We also need to safeguard against security risks. So, there's a new world of cybersecurity driven around AI, so we need to be aware of that. There are sadly harmful uses of AI, either intentional or not. And that is where the output from AI could be, it could be illegal, it could be misleading, it could be hateful. There's lots of things that you can try and twist a chat system to do. It's not programmatic like normal software, so it's harder to control. So how do we think about we're going to do that? As I mentioned before, there's the point of intellectual property rights around who owns the data. And again, for GitLab, it's really important for us to be really clear and say, the data is yours. And we have contracts with all of our vendors that we use in terms of cloud technologies and AI technologies to ensure that you maintain that IP throughout. And maybe more importantly, we kind of hold ourselves accountable, right? So we're always measuring, we're always being self-critical, and we're always looking for feedback. And the best thing about the GitLab community is because partly it's open source, is that we generally have really great feedback from customers, keeping us on the straight and narrow. In terms of examples of what that looks like, I suppose the product itself is probably the biggest example. So we often get questions around which model are we using for GitLab? And it's an interesting one because we have an architecture designed purposely to support various AI models. So that allows us to choose and change models in the future. And that becomes really important, kind of as part of our AI continuity plan, which outlines kind of how we choose technology partners. So how do we know that our vendors are going to be good? What are our contractual arrangements? How long do they store data for? Are their ethos and their ethics aligned to ours, etc.? But also, it allows us to make changes. Now, that could be really obvious. It might be that this particular part of the product is best served by an AI model from Google. Brilliant. Well, we'll use Google for that. Or it might be actually that Claude gives better results, so we'll use that model instead. Or it could be for this particular functionality, we take both models, compare the answers, and mix them together. So we can use and mix AI as we need. But also it means that we can make changes if we have to in more negative circumstances. So if, for example, an AI vendor makes some material change to the way they do business, we can choose to remove them from that architecture and use a different AI vendor instead. If we have a security incident, again, we've got options. We could possibly flip to a different AI vendor, even if the results might not be optimal, but we can still keep running. Or, of course, because we're not dependent on one AI vendor, it means that if there's a security incident, say with Google or with Claude or somebody else, we could disable those pieces of functionality and still leave the rest of the product running. So I think key thing there is, to your point earlier, it's like slowing down a little bit in terms of our adoption and spending some time really thinking about how we want to approach it. And even with AI, diving head into one model, I don't think is a great solution just now. It might make your world easier, but I think there's a world of choice out there and a world of benefits. So yeah, my big thing is really just take time, think about what your approach should be, and by all means, look at the GitLab handbook. And if there's parts of that make sense for you, you should copy it and you should use it, much like I did before I joined GitLab.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And also it opens up the door for experimentation, of comparison, of preventing some kind of a model lock or putting all your eggs in one basket. Like, for some reason, even though we have a plethora of technologies in the world and products in the world, a lot of companies tend to forget that, and they invest into one single ecosystem without taking the best of each one of these and making it more comparative. So having that flexibility and being able to switch and using the right model for the right problem is going to be really important. JT, what are your experience and your insights on this?
Yeah, I think Brian really gave a really comprehensive answer. The only thing I would add to there is to actually create a policy, right? To get one. I mean, with all of the advanced and every day being something new, sometimes it's a new technology, sometimes it's news. To Brian's point, sometimes you learn some news that isn't so great. But to have a policy out there, and do not let perfect be the enemy of good, right? We talk among the three of us about how important it is to iterate, whether that's software development or things like that. This is a spot from a policy perspective where I think you should expect a ton of iteration. The policy you put out today is probably not the policy you have in 6 months. And hopefully it's not a radical change, but we're all going to learn things, right? And then back to, right, regulators are also going to put regulations out there that are going to drive some of that policy as well. So I think it could be really easy to sit back and go, boy, I'm just not too sure what to put in a policy yet, right? Risk and all the alarm bells kind of going off, and you're left with the worst of all worlds, which is no policy at all, right?
Mhm.
So kind of just leaning into what is the policy I can put out now that lets me start to do some of that experimentation, that iteration, empowers my people to where I was talking about earlier, right? They have ideas that I'm not going to have, but how can I kind of create those guardrails, for lack of a better word, to allow them to experiment so they know what they can do and kind of where the red lines are today, knowing that those lines may move very well, and they may move pretty aggressively at times. But I think just making sure you get back in there. And then, we talked about other stuff. I think there are technologies like data loss and stuff like that that you could lean into if you're in a regulated spot, just realizing those are really blunt tools. And you got to make sure you don't lose the advantage of what AI can offer.
No, that's great. And again, I also resonate with that. Like, we are all learning, and this is a really rapid journey, but we're still learning. And so the most important thing is to have a policy in place, having at least a template or a blueprint, having guardrails set right now, with the understanding that it's going to be a living, breathing document until we get more understanding and we learn from it and we can tweak it. and it's going to organically manifest itself into what is best for your organization. I also am of the camp that it's very bespoke to your culture, to your organization, to the problems that you're trying to solve and the business value that you're trying to provide using all these various tools. So having that flexibility and having the ability to modify your policies as you learn is really important. However, I want to bring in something else because both of you touched upon the fact that the danger is having no policy at all. And so, are being extremely radical and saying we are not going to use any tools until we completely understand the ramifications, the repercussions, and all the things that are going to happen. So, we three have been leaders of really large organizations and we've been in the C-suite, and we know that this is a recipe for the rise of shadow IT, and it's a significant concern. And it's going to be more so with the democratization of AI tools. And this, if we don't manage this, it can lead to employees using unauthorized AI tools to enhance their productivity, often bypassing those official channels. And if we make it really friction-based, it's going to introduce much more shadow IT and then create those potential security risks. And all three of us have been pretty vocal about it. So, JD, why don't you kick us off on how enterprises can balance the need to prevent that unauthorized AI usage while fostering an environment where innovation and responsible AI usage can thrive? What strategies can be implemented to mitigate the risks associated with shadow IT without stifling that innovation, which is so important right now, especially as we iterate and we experiment?
I feel like technology is like the same movie over and over again. We just swap out the actors. I feel like this is the same conversation I was having about cloud, right? A number of years ago. And all of that. Right. In all things, it comes back to balance, right? And I don't think you can just say, well, they're going to use it, so let's just let them use it, right? Well, okay, there's a meeting room. By the same token, right, you already said it, right? I can't just like stomp my feet, put my hands on my heads and go, thou shalt not use it. Okay. We're not going to get the advantages of an organization that AI brings, and there are definitely some, as we've seen, but also when people are just going to like go around it, right? And do what they want anyway. Back to empowering your people, right? And education, teaching them what is the appropriate, making sure they understand what the risks are. And I'm going to say, trusting them to do that. That means holding them accountable, by the way, right? But that means, hey, look, we had this conversation that we were not going to upload any of this kind of information into our, chat GPT or cloud or whatever the system may be. You did that anyway. Well, now I have to hold you accountable, just as if like you blew off work and didn't come into work for a week, right? I mean, we need to have those conversations, right? Be a leader, and to be blunt, right? About it, but then also celebrating where people use it appropriately, making sure that people know that is rewarded and that innovation and hey, look, Sally and Fred, they went off and did these two things, and look what they came up with. Right, this is going to save us or give our customers this new feature, or whatever it may be. So really leaning in from that perspective is really where I go to it, right? How do you make the right way the easy way? That's what I remember thinking about cloud all the time, like, risk and compliance and all that. How do I get it to come through the funnel? So I see it, so I know about it, so I can in cases go back and go, no, that's not an appropriate use for us. The risk outweighs the benefit on this one. We got to turn it off. But this other one, no, this is really phenomenal. Oh my God, I never thought about this. We would have never thought about this. This is amazing, right? How do you do that? And then respecting that people are going to make mistakes, right? And inadvertent. I know of a case where a customer was uploading a bunch of SRE type records, right? Outages and typing stuff into AI to figure out the pattern. And they actually learned amazing things, right? Patterns that people didn't pick up or turned out to be really positive. This person didn't realize that some of the information that was in some of those tickets was a little more sensitive than others, right? That's a case where you got to have a serious conversation. You can't do this, but firing that person would have been the worst possible thing you could have done, right? They were actually moving the needle forward And it's a great case for doing education. I feel like I've been stuck a little bit on my record skipping in my head about education, but you hired these people, you believe in them, trust them, educate them, hold them accountable where necessary, and celebrate where they're really successful.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that point, especially the ability or the responsibility of leaders to make the environment much more forgiving, while still educating the workforce and teaching them of the ramifications of their actions or the repercussions that they're having. I think this is really great, where we are we have an opportunity as leaders to actually demonstrate our leadership and allow people the permission to fail, often fast but cheap, and learn from it. And I think organizations that will be much more generative or have that positive culture are going to do way better than toxic environments or organizations that are very bureaucratic. And that will probably make it much better. They will probably deliver value faster. Brian, what are your thoughts? Do you want to add anything to what JT and I have said?
So I think first and foremost, and it's been said already, like it's way better to have visibility into something that you might not be sure about, rather than blocking it and pretending that people aren't doing it. Because it's going to happen. People are going to find a way, whether it's on a different device or a different app or whatever, right? So the path of least resistance will be followed without doubt. I suppose as well, thinking about that risk, it's very easy in IT when new technology comes that we just immediately worry about it. I would encourage firms to really sit back and think about what is the actual threat that AI brings that you're worried about. Because I'm fairly sure, as JT said, that if we're being really specific about what the threats are to the business, they're not really technical threats. They're legal threats around data. And if that's the case, then is it any different then to a cloud or a SaaS provider? You are entrusting, for example, Amazon or Google or Microsoft with all of your servers, all of your private data, all of your customers' data. So you need to make sure you've got legal agreements in place that you can trust them. And if they don't, then there's legal wranglings that you can do to make those things right. I don't think AI is that different. You still need to trust your vendor at the end of the day. And I think that's the key. Like we need to think about AI less as this brand new technology and really just in terms of what's the threat we're worried about and what do we want to do about it. I don't think that necessarily technology is going to be the answer to that. At the same time, given that this gold rush on training data, I would also have concerns about whether vendors are going to change their opinions when the gold starts to dry up. Like the level of investment that is being put into AI is huge. Those firms are going to have to find some way of making that money back to make an ROI from it. Otherwise, it's going to look really nasty. So, I think we will probably continue, sadly, to see some change behaviors, not all positive. So yeah, I think really think about what the threat is. Let's not just be scared of the thing that we don't know. Let's really trust our people because they're going to do it anyway. Let's try our best to give them a safe environment to do it in.
Awesome. Well said. So with that, let's wrap up. I know there are so many points and so many things that we can talk about here, but I want to limit our episode to a decent amount of time so that the listeners will not have to listen to 3 or 4 hours of us ranting. So in today's episode of A Pint of Scotch, we've explored the multifaceted challenges and opportunities surrounding AI, privacy, and policy development. From the critical importance of consumer trust and the complexities of policy creation to the pervasive issue of shadow IT and the vital role of leadership, our conversation today, I hope, has underscored that while the journey of AI implementation is fraught with hurdles, it is also rich in potentials. Preventing that unauthorized AI usage without stifling innovation is a delicate balance that requires clear guidelines, robust frameworks, and transparency. leaders must champion AI governance, embed ethics, privacy, transparency, and education into their corporate culture, and make it okay to give organizations the permission to fail and learn from it and adopt and change. And as AI technology evolves, continuous learning and adoption will be key to staying ahead of that curve. And ultimately, I firmly believe, and I'm sure you both agree with it, the ultimate deployment of AI hinges on responsible management, comprehensive policies, and a steadfast commitment to privacy. So by addressing these issues head on, the enterprises can harness the transformative power of AI while safeguarding their integrity and building lasting trust with their stakeholders and with their customers. But thank you for joining us. And as always, please share your thoughts and stories with us on social media or in the comment section. Remember, whether it's technology, empathic leadership, or the beverage that you're currently on, it's the depth and flavor of the journey that counts. Always make time to savor the wisdom one sip at a time. And until next time, raise your glasses high and cheers to the stories to be told. Thank you.